This UCSD TV program is a presentation of University of California Television. Your support makes UCTV's programming possible. Contribute online at uctv.tv/support. Check out the YouTube original channel UCTV Prime at youtube.com/UCTV Prime. Subscribe today to get new programs every week.
Dr. Pauly is a leader in studying human impacts on global fisheries. Dr. Pauly created novel software documented in more than 500 scientific and general interest publications and used by ocean experts around the world. Initiated in 1999, the Sea Around Us project is devoted to studying, documenting and promoting policies to properly manage fisheries in a way that protects the world's marine ecosystems. Through his teaching and research, Dr. Pauly underscores the importance of setting up marine reserves so that fisheries in peril can make a comeback. He warns that modern fishing practices left unmanaged will leave little but jellyfish and plankton in the sea for future generations to eat. A frightening vision of our oceans and our lives. And so now, to satisfy your appetites, here's Dr. Pauly to present his lecture entitled Jellyfish Burgers, or How We Changed the Oceans and They Changed Us. Dr. Pauly.
So, good evening, Nierenberg family, Scripps. With a prize like that, I have to maintain the interest of the public for 1 hour or a little bit less. I will do that with vignettes covering various topics, and I will try not to be wonkish. I have been this afternoon. And I will start with something that was produced by a graduate student, a PhD student at your institute. It is a collection of 3 pictures. This is in a pier in Florida, a pier where people did day trips. And with a little boat, about 20 guys, and perhaps their wives, they went in '56, and they came back with the biggest fish that they caught. And here they are in '56. And here they are at the same place with the biggest fish that they caught in the '80s. There were lots of these pictures. The same pier, the same location, and they fished at the same place using the same method. And here they are in 2007. And these pictures, they were embedded. That is the only pictures, the only PhD that you gave in Scripps based on photos, actually. And this summarized the picture. This is the only the scientific study and PhD that can be summarized in one picture. And this is about shifting baseline. Actually, the concept I coined in '95. You see the guy today. He's also happy. Why is he happy? Because he doesn't know that in the past they caught this big fish. So his baseline, his happiness baseline in terms of fish that you catch, has changed. And I will show you lots of examples of this shifted baseline, but here with the lessons. So shifted baseline is what prevents us from knowing that things have changed, because we adjust to the reduced abundances. And trivially, fishing has a strong effect on fishing. We saw that in the case of keyword. And you can do some algebra or multiplication. If a picture is 1,000 words and 3 pictures was 1 aha, you have 1 aha is really 3,000 words. Anyway, this is how fishing then has evolved from 1950 to 2006. This is the growth of fishing effort. You see that North America has not much increased. You can be happy about that. Europe has actually increased, and Asia has increased like crazy. And this is excess boats, but these are the boats that are catching world catch that is not increasing anymore. Since the late 80s, the fisheries of the world have ceased to increase. I'm using here FAO data, data from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Actually, the decrease in blue is more marked now, but I will just pretend this is okay. We published this in 2001, and it showed basically that the trend was not going up. This was due, the impression that it went up was due to China over-reporting catch statistic. And I will not, this afternoon I explain why China over-report catch statistics. And I had somebody complaining about me picking up Spain as an example this afternoon, but I prepared that slide when I went to Spain to get an award. So, because you have to give something back. And this is Spain in 1950s, where they fished, and this is where they fish now. Now, I also said this afternoon, when I presented these slides, that I could do the same for France, the same for Japan, the same also for the US. A few countries, actually about a dozen of them, fish the world, and other countries like India or Brazil, big countries, stand by the sideline and exploit only the exclusive economic zone. And this will come up as a big equity problem in the next decade. But China, we've just finished a study that there are fishing vessels in all of these countries, Chinese fishing vessel, and they catch about 5 million tons of fish, which was not reported. They over-report the domestic catch and under-report the foreign catch. So, but catches, comparing catches is not a good thing. Adding catches that you obtain in different parts of the world, because a ton of tuna is ecologically not the same as a ton of sardine, because notably tuna is sardine. And the best way to obtain a currency that can be compared between species is to reduce them to a common denominator. And if you imagine phytoplankton as being the grass of the ocean, and the zooplankton as being the gazelles of the ocean, the prey fish being the lions of the ocean, and the top predators being the dragons of the ocean. So we actually, a table fish is a dragon, right? And the sardine that you don't like, but other people like, for example, in Spain and in France and stuff, this would be the equivalent of a lion. And the gazelles we don't eat because they are very small. So basically, because we know the conversion efficiency, the transfer of matter between one level and the other, and we know where each of the fish that are caught fits in the scale, the trophic level of each fish, we can actually re-express everything in phytoplankton unit, and we call this primary production required. I introduced the term in '95, and this primary production required can be expressed as a function, as a fraction of the primary production that occurs. So how much of the grass that you have in this field is eaten by your cows? This is really that. And you can express this primary production required in color. So in red you have 30% was required in this part of the world that are red. And you can see that it corresponds more or less in the 50s to the countries that were heavily industrialized and fished heavily in Northern Europe, essentially, and a little bit around Japan. And now, this is where we get 30%, 30% and more. And just this as a reminder, we extract in the terrestrial realm, in other words on the continent, we extract about 40% of the primary production. In other words, 40% of the grass and forest and everything is used by humans for wheat and agriculture. It's also used for construction, wood and stuff. It's also paved over for supermarkets and shopping malls. 40%. But 30% is red in here and up. So really we are using the earth very much. Now, this transition between 50s and 2000, we can do it year for year, ratchet-like. And here is the increase of this primary production required. And you can see that basically the fisheries, whether you use 10%, 20% or 30%, increase at about a rate of 1 million square kilometer per year. So the area covered by fisheries, 1 million square kilometer per year. It's a metric unit. I don't know how many square miles it corresponds to, but 4 million square kilometer per year, which were reached in the 80s, is approximately 1 Amazon per year. So the rate of expansion of fisheries was about 1 million square kilometer per year. Then in the 80s, when the different countries declared exclusive economic zones, Japan, for example, could not fish anymore in US waters. They had to go to the high seas beyond 200 miles, and the high seas are more dilute in terms of fish, so they had to export far more. And the growth has ceased because essentially we fish everywhere. So, and this movement, this geographic expansion, occurred not only in space, but also in depth. The boats are fishing deeper and deeper. 1-2 kilometers is common for big trawlers. And moreover, and that is almost amusing, the rate of expansion southward is regular, as almost as a metronome, and it's 0.8 degree latitude per year. So you can calculate, actually, if you extrapolate, when all the fishing boats will be in Antarctica fishing krill, and everything else will be essentially gone. And this is very regular, whether you use 10%, 20 or 30% thresholds. Now, basically, this phenomenon, which I, with other colleagues, coined in '98 as fishing down, this tends to occur everywhere because the big fish are replaced by small fish. And in the ocean, contrary to land, when you're big, you are on top of the food web. It's not so on land. A wolf, for example, is smaller than its prey, a caribou. But in the water, it's simply because of hydrodynamics. The fish have to be pointy, like a Boeing or something. And they have to be pointy, and the mouth is usually at the beginning. So there's not much space for a mouth. So they have relatively small mouth, if you think of a tuna. So they have to eat small things. So if you're big, you can eat bigger things. So size is related to being on top of the food web, but it's also related to being long-lived, because if you are big, you need a certain time to get there. So being big means you're more exposed to fishing. You're exposed to fishing longer. So if you fish across the food web, the first to go will be the big fish, and then gradually the small fish. And because we are smart, we use trawlers, and the trawlers wipe out these nice little flowers, which are not flowers. but which are living on the bottom, consolidate the bottom of the ocean. And this consolidation and this transformation of habitat from a diverse habitat, especially in shallow tropical waters, into a mud bed, is actually something that is happening on a grand scale. And I happen to have been there at a moment where certain areas that were not fished were transformed into mud beds. And I will show you these pictures, which I have retrieved a short while ago. They were used in a TED lecture that I gave a while ago. You can, the TED lecture. And they are quite unique because the fishing, this transition is usually not recorded. So the pristine ecosystem is when we have not been there. The present ecosystem, well, it's a present ecosystem. And a future ecosystem, that's what we're going to get, which we already have in many places that have been abused. And this is a slide that I don't recommend my student to do because that's too much text. But basically, what do you have in a pristine ecosystem? You have large animals, and the water is clean, and at the bottom, there's lots of animals living at the bottom that eat the snow, the marine snow. That's essentially what you have. And I refuse to show you one of these pristine ecosystems because this is what you see in National Geographic. But National Geographic has to go further and further to find them. You cannot go to Jamaica or to the Caribbean to find a pristine ecosystem because they aren't there anymore. They have to go to Kiribati. By the way, Kiribati is very important because it's written Kiribati. And if you say Kiribati, you kind of show that you know things. Kiribati. The National Geographic has to go all the way to Kiribati to make this movie, and then they show how beautiful the world is. Actually, the world looked like New Jersey, the ocean, most of it. But you can't show it because it is transformed and it is largely disgusting. So, present ecosystem, what happens? The average trophic level of the fish that we land is going down. The coral cover diminishes, and we start having outbursts of algae, harmful algae here and there, and muddy areas where the trawlers occur. I will show you all these things. And then at the end you have the dead zones, you have only little fish, you have jellyfish, and you don't like that. And we'll see that these things. So this is how it changed. The guy with the pink hat is me, with a beard, on a boat in Indonesia, introducing trawling. That was the spaceship of the 70s. We introduced trawling into Indonesia. This was working for the German project, development project. And here is what we caught. 90% of the catch consists of, well, habitat. We're catching habitat. We're catching giant sponge that cover the bottom. We're catching some fish, but most of it is habitat. These big things are all sponges that structure the habitat, a muddy habitat, turn it into a reef. So these are reef fishes that live in a habitat that is now mud. And in the meantime, I've discovered that this happened also in the Gulf of Mexico. This happened also in the North Sea. All these habitats that are muddy were before not rocky, reefy habitat, but it was soft reef that can be destroyed by trawling. And habitat, and we just threw it away. And at the time, we didn't know what we were doing. In other words, there were no word for what we were doing. We were just doing it. We were just doing it. But we had no word for, even there was in German no word for discarding at the time. The word has been developed in the meantime. For those of you who are into German, it's called Rückwurf. Yeah. And look at this. Do you see that? A turtle. Now, we caught lots of turtles. They were part of the bycatch. And because the crew were They love turtles, but don't eat dead animals. So they were not eating them, we just threw them away. And then one time we found one that was still breathing, and they were going to eat it. No, I didn't let them. That was, so these turtles. Now, we have killed, I know, I should have put a leather back, but, you know, artistic license and stuff. The turtles eat jellyfish. So do mola mola. So do chub salmon. And about 100 species of fish that are specialized on eating jellyfish. We also trawl on the bottom, and the polyps have no competitors and no predators. So the polyps also love it. So really we have encouraged the life stages of jellyfish everywhere by our activities. And so we have jellyfish galore everywhere. This is the pictures from Namibia, where a system dominated by fish, sardine and hake, has been turned into a system dominated by 14 million tons of jellyfish. And these are not the ones you can eat. And student, I actually don't work. My student work. One of them is here. She works. And then I grab the results. And anyway, this is, I'm in et al. Basically, we looked at, or he looked, this is one of these ethical questions, to say we or he or what. He looked at lots of reports all over the world, including newspapers' account. We have no hesitation to using newspaper account when they cover a good period of time. And in the majority, we got an increase in jellyfish. So we can confirm that this was the first paper, this is the first paper, that unequivocally says there are more jellyfish now than they were before. What are the factors which encourage jellyfish? Well, one of them is dead zones. This is a word that we might as well learn. This is a zone of an ocean zone where the change brought about the system, and plus the inclusion of, plus the fertilizer that comes from rivers add up to a situation where there is a gigantic bloom. And this bloom, they die, the algae die, and they fall on bottom, and the bacteria use up all the oxygen in the process of recomposing this bloom. And I'm saying this is also fisheries induced, because remember, these animals that all were removed by trawling, they all are plankton eaters. They all eat algae. And they actually eat the marine snow that falls on them. But they're gone. So now the marine snow rots. So it is not true that it is only the Mississippi, in this case, which caused the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, or the dead zone in Chesapeake Bay. It's also the absence of filter feeders that could have handled. Chesapeake Bay is known to have had enough oysters to clean up the bay in 3 days. Here they are absent, and they were wiped out 100 years ago by trawling for shrimp. Another possible cause for the increase that we have demonstrated is marinas and coastal development. The polyps are the first colonizers of concrete. They love concrete somehow, and at least they can handle the stuff that comes out of concrete better than other animals. And that is in marinas. The picture here was made from under a marina, under a piece of plastic, and billions of polyps that then strobulate. The word is strobulate. I cannot resist. This is not a nice word. They strobulate, and they bud little jellyfish. Another thing is we fishing for small fish. The biomass is gone. They cannot reduce the larvae of jellyfish. And then trawling and dredging, that is a picture from space. You can see from space mud trails, the same way we can see contrail of airplanes. And you can even see, when you look carefully, that this is shrimp trawlers, because they have two nets making two mud trail on every side, and a central mud trail by the propeller. Sometimes you even see the birds around flying about around and catching the discarded fish from space. So jellyfish abound, and this is one of the biggest jellyfish that occurs in Nomura jellyfish. It is about as big as Volkswagen, and they come from China. Actually, no Chinese colleague will admit to it, but the Japanese say they come from China. And I've been at meetings, they were funny actually, because they do show up in Japan. They don't reproduce in Japan where they come from outer space. They have to come from somewhere. And the current goes that way. So they destroy all the fisheries, the fishing weirs and the fishing net that are in Japan. They also destroy all the intake power of desalination plant in the Persian Gulf and so on. This is a big problem, and so we have to do something about it. And so this is actually a second prize of a design contest that was run by the very serious Science magazine. It was won by one of my students and postdoc, and now assistant professor starting. You become an assistant professor with such things and other things. You will see one more of them. That's Jennifer. But actually it's only half a joke, because jellyfish are eaten in China, in Thailand, in Japan, in Taiwan, and I have eaten jellyfish, and here I am. So some people say that's what but you cannot eat all species. You cannot. They're not all good. For interest, if some of you are interested in jellyfish, some of the water is withdrawn, so that the water content goes from 98% to about 80%, and 80% is regular fish. So when you eat them, they're not watery. They are like Jello or something. And you can have them in chunks, in soy sauce. You can have them, yeah. So at this point, we'll have to come up with solution. And that, Jennifer, again, one of her cheap solution is, but it's not a photo. It's actually a montage. This is not a photo. She made it up. This is her position. And basically, there is the option, people think, that we can, through our stomach, regulate the fisheries. Essentially, not eat certain products and push towards certain product. This, as a policy, can work, but it implies that you have a chain of custody, that you know where the stuff comes from. And various studies that have been done in the US, for example, indicate that at least 40% of the fish is not what you think it is. It's another species. You have heard that from the Fulton market that sells tuna that is not tuna, and salmon that are not salmon that you think they are, and to snappers that are not snappers, and so on. This is the big issue. The problem with trying to regulate this to consumer demand is extremely difficult, because a chain of custody is not established. So the legislation that has to be pushed is to establish a chain of custody. And the attention that has been given to this problem started the wrong way, because it assumes that the consumers can do something about it, but actually they cannot, because the chain of custody is not there. And the agitation that one does probably has to be done at the level, not of the consumer, but at the level of the wholesaler. In other words, what Greenpeace does, distribute leaflet in front of whole market or whole world or whatever, whole food, and intimidate the customer into not going in there. Anyway, another aspect of fisheries is that they are all heavily subsidized. The wrong version is this. You have fish that are produced as a function, or that are harvested as a function of fishing effort. And the fishing cost, the straight line, in principle determines where you end up fishing, because the cost is equal to your return, in principle. And in principle, then, at that point, not in principle, in praxis, the fisheries, the operators want subsidies to reduce the cost of fishing, to reduce that line. Now think about what happened. You reduce that line, you make it lower, you actually reduce the catch. And this is crazy, but most politicians don't get that. Because in most other productive enterprise, whether it's car, whether it's agriculture, the increase of the something that you want to have is monotonous. There is always an increase, even if it's very, very, very expensive. For example, in agriculture, you can inject so much money into it that you have hydroponic at the end. But you will have a higher production. But in fisheries, the boats are not instruments that generate production, are not factors of production. They are not only harvesting. So they don't produce anything, the boats. It's Mother Nature would produce something. And so you cannot trick her by saying, I will have more boats, or I will reduce the cost of the boats, because she cannot do anything about it. So the result is that you reduce the catch. And right now the catch of the world declining is because we have too many boats. And the solution that is being offered is, by many countries, including China and the European community, is more subsidies. And that will decrease the catch further. That is a clear version of subsidies, but what in reality happens, this is circulus viciosus, vicious circle in English, and you can start anywhere because vicious circles are like that. Let's start at 12 o'clock. You subsidize a fishery. What does it do? It builds capacity, more of it, and you have this boat, and they have to expand. They have to go further too. Do I need to demonstrate that? I don't, because I have demonstrated before. So they go out and they wipe out the fish there. They're destroying ocean diversity. Do I need to demonstrate that? I showed you pictures. So then they go further and further away. It's more costly. And what do? We throw more subsidies. And the subsidy is huge. Until recently, the World Bank assumed that about $20 billion dollars was spent annually. Actually, it's about 30 billion, because they had forgotten the country that don't report subsidy to the OECD. So we added that, and we had a student, again, deciding that he would call it the good, the bad, and the ugly. Somehow the bad ended up being black. I wonder why this is always like that. Anyway, the bad subsidies are the ones that cause more capacity increase. Fuel, for example, or purchasing boats. The white is things like research, obviously, safety at sea, and so on. That is management. That costs money, but it's actually a good thing. And gray is things that we don't really know whether this is You remember the film The Good, the Bad and the Ugly? The ugly guy, he didn't know whether he was a bad guy or not a bad guy. At the end he survives, right? Because Clint Eastwood doesn't kill him, but because it turned out to be a bad guy, a good guy. You don't know. And an example of such subsidies is decommissioning subsidy. In other words, you offer fishers money so they sell the boat. Now, they can sell the boat, they go to Las Vegas or wherever fishers go, and what do I know where they go? And they stop fishing. This is a good thing, you have reduced capacity. But they can also get the money for the old boat and use it as the down payment for the new one, which they often do. And depending on how the conditions that are associated with this decommissioning subsidy, they can actually encourage more capacity building. So we call them ugly. And then people think that aquaculture is going to be the solution, because they have to learn two important things about aquaculture. First thing, aquaculture is the thing that happened in China. It's not a thing that happens here. China has more than 2/3 of the world's aquaculture production. Okay? So when people brag about, oh, we are going to produce, the we has to include, has to be, we Chinese have to do that. Because in the West, we don't do aquaculture, really. And the aquaculture that we talk about in the West is very often the production of carnivorous fish. The super lion that I was talking about, dragons. And this is about, economically, ecologically, as profitable as raising gazelles to feed lions that we give the dragons to eat, and then we eat the dragons. That's ecologically what we do when we raise salmon or tuna. This is ecologically completely crazy, but it is economically profitable. Why? Because it has a luxury market. And where the only comparison can be made, that I can make, is with Ferraris. You know Ferraris, they are neat, they're red, and old guys like the Ferraris because they do what they are supposed to do. And you can see an old guy in a Ferrari, it works. It works. I have a colleague who had a Porsche, and it did work. But they don't resolve the transport problem, right? They work, but they work for something else. And so aquaculture, the farming of carnivorous fish, works, but it doesn't feed people. This is not what it does. Aquaculture can feed people, but it has to be like in China. So that is the problem that we have. When we talk about aquaculture, aquaculture is a wide spectrum of activity, and that spectrum covers raising cockles, raising carps, raising tilapia in fresh water, or raising bivalves, mussels, and so on in marine waters. But raising tuna and raising salmon in feedlots is not going to feed the world. It's going to be a luxury product like a Ferrari. However, 1/3 of the fish is being turned into animal feed. And we don't know that chicken and pork and stuff, they don't swim. They don't feed on fish normally, except in Bahamas. They are the swimming pigs. I've discovered them a few weeks ago. The swimming pig in Bahamas. I have a former student who is now looking about how she told me the snout gets sunburned because this is an absolutely wild story. Anyway, the 1/3 of the fish catch of the world is little fish. Remember the gazelles of the ocean? And these actually are excellent to eat. And You guys don't want them to want to eat them. That's okay. We like them. And in Europe, the Spaniards, they love anchovies. The Italians love them. The French also love them. And the Peruvian, who are exporting every year the equivalent of 5 to 8 million tons of anchovy as fish meal, are beginning to understand that they can turn them into excellent food and could export them as food for humans. And presently they have 3% of the anchoveta catch turned into human food, and that's the biggest reserve that humankind has of fish. It can dwarf aquaculture production because presently the anchovies and so on are used to make fish meal, which is used for pig, chicken, and salmon. But you need 3 times more fish meal than you get on salmon. So why not eat the fish right away? They have more omega-3. What do you think salmon gets omega-3? They get them from the anchovies, from the fish meal they get. So everything is fine. That's my last picture. Basically, fisheries are, as many people will tell you, an extremely complex thing. By the way, when somebody tells you a problem complex, you know that they don't understand, because everything is complex. So that's not a descriptor of anything. But fisheries really consist of 2 big sectors. And in every country, there is a large-scale sector and a small-scale sector. The small-scale sector, and I'm not being a romantic here, I'm being very, very specific about my numbers. Even if we don't account for the fact that the catch of small-scale fisheries is systematically underreported, they catch about the same amount as industrial fisheries. The jobs are easily created in terms of dollars. They don't need much fuel because they don't go places. And because they are tied to place, they are not involved in this monster Ponzi scheme that fisheries now are. In other words, going forever to new places because you have devastated what you had in the back. And so I personally believe that the future of fisheries, if it has a future, is going to be small-scale fisheries. And small-scale fisheries in the US also exist. This is recreational fishing, this is subsistence fishing, this is small-scale owner-operated fishing. And the social, economic, and other benefits are much bigger. And if people ask me, it's a lame joke, but if people ask me, how come this is the large-scale fisheries, in spite of these differences that get promoted, it's because the small-scale fishers usually don't play golf. The stuff that I have presented to you tonight is not the stuff that one person does. It's teamwork. Really, all I do is orchestrate nowadays. And they are some of the people who work with me. And I get serious funding from the Pew Charitable Trust. I have gotten such funding for 12 years. And this is one of the few donors that lets me work on a global basis. There are very few people who let you work on a global basis because most donors want to have their little patch studied, but Pew lets me work on a global basis, and thus we have been able to produce baseline data that a huge number of NGOs and groups have been able to use because we have been able to work on a global basis. So, thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have time for some questions, and you may have seen the blue cards that were handed out earlier. If you'd like to write down a question, please do so and pass it to the outer aisles, and my colleagues here will collect them for you. We are running a competition in connection with the questions. There will be a prize for the briefest written question.
And there's no prize for the longest answer.
No. Thank you, Dr. Pauly. There's no more prizes for you. So
they're not going to win here.
then these ones are not going to win. That's why they're the first two. So the first question is, most restaurants in San Diego seem to be oblivious to the threats posed to many species they routinely serve. What do you think is the best way to reach the chefs of these restaurants?
My student, Jennifer Jacquet, in the meantime, assistant professor somewhere, I had outsourced my brain for her to answer this. She would say, is it a problem when we have to work positive reinforcement or shaming? Do we want to shame them? And there are lots of situations where shaming actually works better than reinforcing positive stuff. And so there is no reason why a few young people should not go with clown suit or something and with a few posters. And this restaurant sells illegal fish, and so that everybody knows. You would see that within a week they would capitulate. That's one method.
Thank you.
That's one method particularly suited to young people, adventurous and stuff.
Question number 2. How do you break the pervasive circle between the fish meal industry and the pig chicken industry?
I think that this will evolve positively because essentially this market for fresh for fish being eaten directly is offering far more and than the fish meal industry, and so the demand for fish, for small fish also, will have the price increase. In Peru, you get a few bucks for a ton of fish meal, but you get $1 or $2 per fish if you sell it on ice and in a good quality. And I think some of you will be happy to say that the market will sort it out.
Thank you. Do you believe that marine protected areas are useful for species rehabilitation?
Well, actually, this is not only a belief. You see, this expansion that I'm talking about, that happened since the invention of application of fossil fuel to fishing, really, on a grand scale, on a earth-spanning scale. This expansion has closed all the protection that the fish had naturally from us. Depth was a protection. Cold was a protection. Ice was a protection. Storms were a protection. All of this, rocky grounds were a protection. And because we couldn't fish in this area. And with it, technological development, GPS that allows us to put the net exactly between two rocks, we can now go everywhere where the fish were protected before. So if we don't create spaces where the fish can be, can do their thing, they will go. They will go. Because fishing is adapted to what is most abundant. Generally, you target this fish, the other fish that you catch, you will catch them incidentally. And if they have a longevity that is superior to that of the target fish, you will destroy them. The bycatch will always be overfished. So basically, we will lose all the big fish if we don't have marine protected areas, if we don't invent a replacement for what was naturally there. And this is, in fact, the natural protection that existed before we developed all this technology, is the reason why the Native American, for example, could live 10,000 years in here, exploiting coastal resources. and why fisheries have existed in the Middle Ages that lasted hundreds of years. Because they couldn't go after the last fish, but now we can go after the last fish. And that is essentially, marine protected area is not an idea that comes from left field. And this is the natural counterpart to the fact that the fisheries are expanding in space and in the spaces where fish have hidden.
Thank you. We're moving on to the short answer questions now. Do more sustainable fishing methods like pole and line have the potential to be scaled up to meet the national and global demand and yet let stocks recover?
Yes, though at the end of the day, it is not the gear that you use, it's the number that you extract that determines how much, whether stock is sustainable or not. So, yes, pole and line should replace trawlers because trawlers remove habitat, but the fact that you use pole and line is not sufficient. You also must use fewer pole and lines. It's all obvious, obviously.
The next question, will radioactive material in the ocean affect fish communities worldwide?
Oh, that's the last problem we have. I think even after Fukushima, I don't think this is really something that we need to worry.
Very good. Is increased acidity in the ocean increasing jellyfish populations?
I don't know that. I don't know that. I don't know the differential susceptibility to oxygen, to acidity between jellyfish and fish. What they do have a differential susceptibility to oxygen, to lack of oxygen, but I don't know about acidity.
Very good. Here's a request for you to talk about farming of vegetarian fishes like tilapia. We know what it means.
I have mentioned that the only aquaculture that can really feed people potentially on a grand scale is the aquaculture of herbivores. But this is a problem. The tilapia, we thought about them as an aquatic chicken and so on, but let's not forget that when you grow freshwater fish, you compete with agriculture for water, and that is a big problem. There are certain countries where aquaculture is doomed because of water scarcity.
What do you think is going to happen as the bluefin tuna population is further decimated? How do you think our society is going to react?
Oh, we'll eat something else. Big deal. Because of shifting baseline, we won't even know it. Actually, when we eat surimi, what is it, surimi? You know what it is? This, they press with the water under pressure all the little fiber from the skeleton after they have removed the fillet. And these little fibers of muscles of fish is compacted into fish sticks, I guess, and it's surimi. And I found surimi even in France in a supermarket, even in France. So that stuff, you know, the French are supposed to eat well. That stuff is even in France. So if we can eat surimi, you don't need tuna.
Directing attention to the PhD research area, what problem do you think needs the most attention? This is free advice I think you're giving here. What problem do you think needs the most attention, and where can they make the biggest difference?
I will really plagiarize the advice that you will find in Advice to a Young Scientist by Sir Peter Medawar, the Nobel Prize winner. He had written a nice little book called Advice to a Young Scientist. Basically, you have to pick big problems. He gave the example, if you pick up a problem, why half of the sea urchin eggs are spotted, you will have only one person who is interested. Why the other half of the sea urchins are not spotted. And this is, nowadays, there is, we need to attack problems that feed into policy. also we must attack problems, I think, that are thematic and not local, because we need solutions that work in several places, because lots of people cannot do the research that you can do here at Scripps. So you doing it for the world. Yeah.
I think this is going to be our last question, and I think our prize winner. We have many more questions, but your 14 hours of work today are up, so I think this has to be it. Can jellyfishes be used as fertilizer?
Yeah. That's a short answer.
Would you join with me in thanking Dr. Pauly again?
Thank you.